Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, sponsored by the IBCA. We are a global podcast that shares the passion for the coaching profession. You will hear the stories of coaches from all around the world. We are covering the profession in game, outside of the game, and anything in between. As always, thank you for listening. We look forward to sharing the coaches' stories with you.
Welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast. Today's guest is Allen Whitehart, head coach at Milton High School, president of the Georgia High School Basketball Coaches Association, and president of the National High School Basketball Coaches Association. So a lot of titles there, but Coach, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited. Anything I can do to share and grow the game, I'm all for it.
So we start every episode with just call the opening tip, and we get background on your story and how you've gotten to where you are, and maybe your program, kind of wherever you want to go, because you have such a, as we noticed by your titles there, you have a lot of experience and a lot of things you're doing. So just kind of tell us about your journey and how you got to where you are, and maybe a little bit about your program.
It's I didn't plan to be a basketball coach when I started my career, to be honest with you. I mean, I played basketball, loved the game, was actually in the fitness industry. Um, was in the Marine Corps, got out of the Marine Corps, went to school in UNC Chapel Hill, studied kinesiology. My wife, now girlfriend, then got in law school at Emory University here in Atlanta, followed her down in the fitness industry. And one of my clients in one of my gyms, it actually was one of Pat Summitt's original recruits at Tennessee. Her name was Cindy Brogdon, always talking basketball. She's like, hey, I've got a friend who is looking for an assistant coach, JV coach. Would you be interested in sitting down talking to him? That was in 03. Went over. I thought it was for free, got a little bit of a stipend, but I was doing it. About 3 months into the job, I came home and told my wife I was quitting my job. I'm going to go back to school to make my history minor and history major. With kinesiology, I was a history minor. So ended up being went back to school at Oglethorpe University, got my history degree after 3 years as an assistant, first year teacher, first year head coach. So that was at Centennial High School. I took over there in 06. They had been, a middle of the road program. My first year as the head coach, we won 28 games, went to the largest classification state title game, was there for 4 years. And then Buford High School, if you know anything about Georgia athletics, Buford High School is probably one of the big sports powerhouses in multiple sports. They came calling, spent 5 years there, have had success again, but honestly, I got burnt out. I had started a family, and with my oldest starting kindergarten, I took a year away. I went into corporate sales, and he was at a school called Pace Academy, had a guy by the name of Wendell Carter. My son was like, Dad, we got to go watch this guy. I've heard he's going to be a pro. I go in there, man, I'm like a kid in a candy shop. I mean, I'm writing on napkins, drawing up sets. So when I got home that night, that was in December, told my wife, hey, I'm going to start dropping my resume. Basketball, that's what I do. Took over at Etowah for 1 year, turned that program around. They had never really won their first region title in school history. They were a 42-year-old school. And Milton, I'd always competed against them in similar regions. So they came calling back in 2017. And I just finished my 7th year with them.
Wendell Carter, former Bull Wendell Carter, I believe.
That is correct. I think he's with Orlando now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was good. He was good with the Bulls, or wasn't good with the Bulls, and then all of a sudden he leaves the Bulls, and he's really good now.
That's most players since 1998, but that's a different story. So Coach, something Todd and I really like to do our homework on our guests, and you kind of talked about your journey through multiple high schools, and you've pretty much been successful, credit to you, at each one of them. We always find it interesting for the coaches that have been successful at each one of them, and we actually did an episode on just kind of building your resume, but what were kind of the things you feel like carried over at each of the stops to make you as successful as you were? That could be culturally or X's and O's or personnel or coaching staff. What do you think kind of contributed to all those successes?
I think it's a little bit of everything, to be honest with you. I mean, I got a way I do things. I mean, we're very attention to detail I mean, we really break everything down to its finest points, but really it starts with buy-in. I mean, people use the word culture all the time. You can preach and talk about this culture, that culture, but you've really got to have buy-in. I mean, it starts with the players, but it's the community as well. And I've been fortunate that the stops I've been to, they've bought into what we're trying to do and what we're trying to restructure and rebuild. And I think that's been the biggest part of us, the programs I've been a part of. And I say us because it was more than me, for us to have success.
So you've been highly successful, as John said. You made it to state championship game 3 times, finished as a runner up. Multiple part question here. We'll kind of build on it. Um, First of all, like what did you learn from experiences? Maybe like, the first time you went, and then the next time, and then the third time. Kind of how did you build your learning and kind of adapt to that, and then I'll go from there.
The first one, here locally, Eddie Martin, Hall of Famer. He was the head coach at Norcross and then Greater Atlanta Christian, and coincidentally followed me up at Buford. Legendary coach. And what I learned probably in that first one, we actually lost at the buzzer 59-58, and he had some unbelievable players on that team. It was taking advantage of every small opportunity. The big ones are going to happen, but it's the small things. And I felt like his team probably did a little bit better job of that than mine. Being a first year coach in the largest classification state finals, you have to take a little bit of time to reflect. And then as you progress, I get to Buford, year one there, I go back to the state finals. Um, and it's against him again. So, I learned a little more. He got me again in that one. And then the third time, you know, I overcoached. I overcoached the third time. And then fortunately, I was back after another Final Four and then a state final at Milton, and I finally figured it out. Was able to, if you will, break the code, get the monkey off my back, and finally win one after three earlier attempts. And then it was just, you hear that whole thing, keep it simple, stupid. You just you get to that point and something's got you there. And I felt like the previous 3 times I tried to overcoach and tried to do things that maybe we hadn't done very well, and it kind of caught up with us and beat us. And that's no disregard to what the other teams, that the other teams that beat us were really good. Well, coached and had really good talent.
So that'd be a
Not
lot
dry
difficult.
in the room because it's the end for some seniors. You're really trying to pick them up and let them know that it's an unbelievable accomplishment. But on the flip side of that, you're trying to really encourage those younger players, those underclassmen. Hey, man, we're here. We've accomplished something great, and then you're trying to figure out how to build upon it. You're trying to figure out how to get over the hump, if you will, and you're trying to figure out how to get back. And there at Buford, we played in 3 Final Fours and 2 state finals in a 5-year period. So we were pretty successful in getting back. And same thing here at Milton. We played in I think we played in 1, 2, 3 Final Fours and a state finals as well. So I've kind of got versed in losing them, and it feels a lot better winning them. I can tell you when you get in those last few games.
Coach, let's talk about the concept. You had kind of said over coaching, and I think that's a really interesting concept because I think we all do it. Kind of can you just kind of go through, how does a coach find that balance between like, yeah, you want to stay proactive when you're playing somebody and try to stay a step ahead, but sometimes do you do more harm than good by doing things, as you said, that maybe you haven't really practiced too much?
I think for me, for instance, I think early in those first few attempts at trying to win it, we had kept everything status quo as we made our run through the playoffs. Like last year, we got back to the Final Four and we started out 4-7. We were pulling our hair out right around Christmas, trying to figure out. We knew there was something pretty good there. We had some pieces, but it was really later in the season when it started to click. And it was the simple things. It was, simplifying concepts, simplifying game plans, and really letting them, when you overcoach, I think the kids think more than they play, and then their feet become slow and their reactions become slow. And a lot of times you miss a lot of opportunities.
So you have something unique that we have not talked to anybody about. Your team won a state championship in 2021 and then got invited to play in the Geico National Tournament. For our listeners, I'm going to break this up into a couple pieces here. For our listeners, can you explain what that is?
So most of the teams in that tournament are probably top 10, top 15 in the country. The year we went, there were 8 teams. I just remember the gauntlet we played. We opened up with Calvary Christian. They were top 10, beat them. And then we turn around, we play IMG, and then we turn around and we play Montverde. So, I mean, it's a gauntlet to play in those tournaments, but it's usually the top 10 or 12 teams playing for the national title that Geico sets forth. It's a complete, you're selected. You don't apply for it. So we were blessed to get to that point. I think that year we finished 7th in the country, finished in the Final Four of that tournament. So, we were blessed to be there. But you're playing against the best of the best in that tournament.
And then to follow, maybe what were some things maybe you learned about high school basketball teams across the country from that experience? Obviously we're all very knowledgeable about the regions we play in, but maybe what were some things you learned about playing teams from around the country?
Trends of different teams, different areas, teams play differently. And I thought we built ourselves up pretty good. We actually played a team out of Wisconsin that year earlier. I think we played a team out of Tennessee, a team out of Wisconsin, playing different teams from different areas because it kind of prepares you for a national tournament because, maybe different trends are going in different areas of the country and different styles of basketball.
So let's talk about the Georgia High School Basketball Coaches Association a little bit. You were kind of one of the founding members. So let's start with why you thought it was important to help start that organization and then kind of what it does for your state and how it's helping.
We had tossed it around throughout the years. It was always about a voice when you're dealing with high school associations. You just want to be heard. You want your thought processes to be heard. And in fact, it was during COVID, if you recall, all of the online clinics you could do an online clinic 24/7 during COVID, which was amazing of all the different people that were doing that. But as I spoke in some clinics, I listened to a ton of them and just reached out to people that I knew. I've been blessed to meet a lot of people in this game. And I said, hey, this is the perfect opportunity. We're all at home. Let's format and put together what this needs to look like. And I started calling around to different organizations and everybody was really helpful. But we were kind of in the dark. We just kind of went with what we thought. It wasn't until that year when we went to the first National High School Basketball Coaches Association conference that we really learned a lot. Early on, it was just we incorporated, we got a voice, but that was about the extent of what we were doing. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, we've got the live period, which is I would put up against, most coaches will tell you it's us and Section 7, our Southeast Regional and Section 7 are the 2 biggest in the country. We got that. And then, we changed our all-star game. Our all-star game used to just be in the middle of nowhere at a high school. And, we put some time and effort in behind that. We moved it to the Skyhawks Arena in College Park, which is downtown where the Dream play. Really vamped that up. This past year, I kind of spearheaded with the help of Dr. Eric Holland. We put together our first Hall of Fame. We kind of took over the all-state selection process. So it's been incremental steps as we go, but it's been the other organizations, the Wisconsins, the Indianas, the Ohio's, the Michigans, the state of Washington. I mean, those people have been so unbelievable in helping us, helping guide us as we take the next step, the next step, the next step. And I went in, I didn't stick a toe in when we went into the national high school. Me, Jesse McMillan at Norcross and my assistant Ryan Cadell, we jumped in with 2 feet all the way in and fully bought in and just got behind what they were doing because I thought it was really important for our voice, not just in Georgia but nationally. I think there's a lot of good that still can be done with us just trying to push the envelope, trying to get us to where the game needs to be.
So, kind of a two-part here. Just as a coach, talk about maybe a little bit what these organizations can do for you as a coach, and then you as a president, how do you make sure you represent the needs of the whole state, right? We know in Illinois, like you have kind of the Chicago area, and then you have the rest of the state, and it's very different philosophies, very different sizes and schools. I think from I don't know how not too far out of Chicago, the closest big school is down in Effingham, right at the bottom of the state. So, you know, how do you kind of help your coaches, and then how do you benefit the whole state and help them and represent them?
So I'll tell you, just like you guys, there's two states here. There's the state of Atlanta and the state of Georgia, two totally different animals. And early on, it was a problem. I mean, a lot of the outreaching in southern Georgia, because we're in northern Georgia, a lot of the southern Georgia teams or coaches felt left out. And the big thing we did, we had some just inclusion. Um, inclusion. We pulled in some representatives for our on our executive board from the South to make sure that their voices were heard. We went into North Georgia, the mountain regions, because we just thought we thought it was important for those people to be involved. The thing I do at the state level and the national level, if someone's disgruntled, I just say, hey man, we want your help. We want solutions, not just complaints. We want to make solutions. So if it means something to you and you think there's something wrong, by all means, we want you to join us. And I think that's one of the ways we've been able to be successful is the inclusion process.
All right, so this is kind of the halfway point before we get to our next topic here. We call this halftime adjustment. So for you, I want to talk about I mean, obviously you're going down to state championships, right? And as a coach, I guess how are you keeping what you do the same, right? And not overcoaching, like you said, but then making those necessary adjustments because I think we all know it. Time you get to that point, everybody knows everything. you know, they're scouring through films. People are 2 games ahead, whatever. So how are you kind of, I guess, maybe approaching the other team and then but handling your own business to be prepared and maybe have some stuff ready if you need it?
Honestly, it's my staff. I've got the best staff I've ever had in my career. They are unbelievable, and they are a big part. We do after action reports after everything we do. If you want to call it SWOT analysis, you've heard the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. We break down every aspect of what we're good at. We don't really like the deodorant wins where you win and you play terrible, but you feel good. We're breaking even after wins. We have film session. We're trying to just learn and get better as a staff, but more importantly with our kids. We're trying to teach on a daily basis because what happens is if you only teach when you lose or you only make the corrections when you lose, kids are going to read through that. They know you're going to have film even after a big win, or if it's a big loss, we're still going to look at film and understand that we're trying to get better. And the question we ask every day is, do we get better today? And a lot of days that answer is no. But then we try to win more days than we lose, and we call it stacking days. We're just trying to stack consecutive days and progression so we can get to that point.
So as we kind of shift to the second half of the show, we have lots to talk about. For our topic for this half of the show, we're going to talk about obviously the National High School Basketball Coaches Association, growing the game nationally, and maybe some things you want to accomplish now as president. So recently you were appointed the president. Let's just simply start off with maybe what are some of your goals for the organization and what are some things you want to grow?
I think the big things that we're trying, like right now, one of the things one of our big initiatives, Dave Archer, who's the executive director, is educate to navigate. And the big thing is as you know, at each level, from the pro level, college level specifically down to the high school level, is the map has changed dramatically with NIL, with OTE, with the G League, and all of these NIBC schools. And there's nothing wrong with those, but you really just, we're trying to educate parents and athletes to be able to navigate those roadmaps. That's big for us. We want to be able to help our student athletes be able to navigate what it looks like. So that's really big for us at the national level. Last year, myself and a gentleman out of Iowa, Jeff Schertz, if you've heard of rising coaches at the college level, one of the things I coined for the national level is "We've got next." Because like if you go to a game of pickup and you walk on the court, they say "We've got next." So I started looking around in Georgia, and my counterparts are all around my age, mid 40s to late 40s, 50s, and we look back and we're like, who's the next group of young coaches that are going to take over and continue to progress what we're trying to grow. And nationally, that's kind of a trend that I figured out that wasn't as big either. So we got this "We've Got Next" initiative where we're mentoring young coaches, mentor them to get better. And so that's another initiative. And then the last one's the 28.5 initiative. That's where we're trying to grow girls basketball, grow women's basketball, trying to give that life to where they're progressing at the same rate.
So you mentioned the changing landscape of basketball, right? NIL and all that, and educating parents and players. Um, I guess, how are you guys going about doing that, and what are some of your ideas to think about to educate the parents and players? Because it's a lot different. You look at some of these Power Five schools, like unless you're a top 15 freshman, you're probably not getting as big of a look, and everything trickles down. And I don't know, I saw the other day maybe there were still 1,000 kids in the transfer portal, right? So kind of what are you guys doing to educate and inform and maybe help some of the people that are listening today, with ideas?
I mean, it's saturated for sure. Everybody hits the headlines with the kids who get a million. That's rare, and I mean, you've got to be the best of the best. And we're just trying to get them to understand, getting out literature, getting out key points to how they can progress. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's this whole thing with players. Now with the NIL for years and years and years, it was frowned upon. Was it happening? Sure. I mean, we can go back. You can look back at SMU with their death penalty back in the '80s for football. You can look at Reggie Bush having his Heisman Trophy taken, and then all these other things that happened throughout the '80s, '90s, and early 2000s. And now you're at this point where athletes are actually getting paid for their name, image, and likeness. So our big goal is not to take anything away from them. It's just to educate them, to let them understand what NIL is, what it looks like, and really the value of high school basketball coaches. I mean, you think about all the great players throughout the history of the game that had unbelievable high school basketball coaches. And we want that voice to be heard because we think it's important. And that's not taken away from anybody else because I think there's a place for everybody in the game with the right intentions.
An interesting topic, and Todd and I have talked to a lot of guests about this, is there's so many coaches coming and going, and young coaches get in and then they get burned out and leave, or you see coaches come in and they can't, there's a lot going on behind the scenes and they're like, I'm done with this. So something Todd and I have really discussed and we've discussed in our association is kind of mentoring young coaches and helping people because we all know, Coach, that 6 inches, as Todd likes to say, between the assistant seat and the head seat comes with hundreds of things that have nothing to do with basketball. And that first year you're a head coach, you're like, I did not know I had to do this too. So kind of how do we set something up so that coaches stay in the profession as they did years ago for 20, 30, 40 years?
Well, we hope this is a beginning process with the "We've Got Next" initiative. Me personally, in my program, my assistants, when I first started doing it, an administrator would look at you like, "Why are they in this meeting?" But I take my young assistant. He's going to be a really good head coach. I take him to budget meetings. I take him to booster meetings. I take him to administrative meetings with my athletic director. Because if what you don't know, you don't know. When you're there and the head coach is coming back to the bench and you're doing X's and O's and that's all you're doing, that's great. But you're not on the inside understanding what a budget looks like, understanding what some of those tough conversations are like. So I'm trying to tool my assistant coaches to understand what those things look like So when they do get their opportunity to be a head coach, they're fully prepared, not only just on the X's and O's side, but on the administrative side as well, because that are the things that'll get you fired. I mean, X's and O's, you can schedule yourself out of a job, but more importantly, you can also not adhere to the administrative policies of your district or state. That'll get you out of a job as well.
So on that same kind of topic here, getting coaches involved in their state associations and the national association where they feel like, their voice is heard. And I feel like sometimes coaches are reluctant to, or they don't know. So like, what do you think is a big step in getting those people involved and hearing those voices, not only in a state, but nationally?
I think it starts with a lot of data, giving them a voice in the data. Before we really do anything in Georgia, we send out questionnaires. We want to know what you think. We want to get the data behind our thinking and give those people the voice, because it's one thing to say, hey, we want a shot clock. And it's another thing to say, hey, we've got 89% of our coaches throughout Georgia that say we want a shot clock. And that's just at the Georgia level. I haven't dug in enough. I'm new to this spot as the national level, but I've been on the executive board. But there are questionnaires that go out a lot, just getting what people think and what people feel. And I think when people see that data and they understand that their voice is being heard and it's being pushed, I think that's a large part of it as well.
Second part here is, and obviously you're new to the national aspect, but you've been involved in it. You've been going, you've been communicating. I think it's really interesting of the different perspectives you could get at the national level, right? You have Alaska, Hawaii, New York, Georgia, Illinois, very different styles of basketball, different cultures, personalities, all that. So what are some of your ideas to kind of compile all that and make sure everybody's represented and that their ideas are put forth?
Well, I think it first starts with our board and then our executive board, more importantly. I mean, you've got people from all over the country that are on those boards, and we can't get together every month in person, but we do a lot of Zoom calls, and there's a lot of discussion about multiple facets of the game and how it's growing in some areas and how it's being held back in some areas. And we just try to get a collective voice. We try to get a collective voice. I think this year we had 38 states represented at the national conference. And my immediate assistant, my VP, Ryan Cadell, next year we're going to host the national conference here in Georgia in Savannah. And our goal is to have all 50 states represented. That's our hard line goal, is to have a voice for every state.
So you talked about the shot clock, and we talked about this off the air. So let's kind of expand now. What are maybe some ways, let's just start off with, what are maybe some ways we can get each state to buy in? As we talked about off the air, Illinois is just starting, but some states around us are very reluctant. Georgia has it, but let's be honest, there's some states in the South that are very reluctant. So how do we get coaches to buy into this idea? Because as Todd said off the air, there's 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds in Europe that are playing with 24 second. And some of our coaches are reluctant for 40 seconds.
Well, I mean, I think it's educate again, share. And that's what we did. We did a lot of research. One of the gentlemen who's one of our executive board members here in Georgia, Rory Welsh, he did a great job of building that platform. And we just really got behind it and had the statistical data. I mean, but when we went and presented, Tom Crean at that time was the head coach at the University of Georgia, and Josh Pastner was the head coach at Georgia Tech. We had both of those gentlemen and the Atlanta Hawks behind our push to get a shot clock. And we had all the data and all of the resources behind us to be able to build that and be able to really open some eyes, because then we had the data that showed that how many coaches in Georgia wanted the shot clock. And then what we do with other states, we are openly share everything that we have. Charlie Ward of football fame, he's part of the push in Florida. He's a high school coach there at Florida State University High School. He and I've had multiple conversations over the last 2 years to get that process started for them. And it's just sharing, being a collective voice, sharing with those states that maybe want to get to that. And then just the data behind it. I mean, if you look at the NBA draft this year, I can't remember how many. I know Atlanta took one. There were a lot of French players specifically that went really early. And then if you look at the draft overall, European players are inundating the first round. And that just goes to show development. And I'm not saying the shot clock's the only factor because that would be unfair to say, but I think it does have a lot to do with the decision making in the game because like we talked about off air, the late clock, the late clock, the after timeout, end of quarter, getting 2-for-1s, knowing, there's 45 seconds, it's your ball. If you get a quick shot, you're going to be able to defend and come back and get a second shot late in the clock. That matters. That puts coaching in the game. And I think that's some of the things that a lot of people don't think about until you format it and diagram it and put it out there.
And you kind of answered the question a little bit, but my follow would be like, I guess reaching those who have kind of always, and we talk about this a lot, like you kind of have a bias of coaching by who you were coached by, right? Or who your mentor was. And, I'm sure there's communities in your state that they've always done it this way, right? We have plenty of in our state, they run this system, they do this, they do that, and they haven't changed for years. So how do you kind of reach those people in that way? And I guess maybe you're not gonna reach all of them, but maybe when they're unhappy about the result of, hey, we got the shot clock, right? When in your state, how would you kind of talk to them and encourage them to say, hey, you guys, you can do this, or here's some ideas, or whatever it may be?
We included it in our state clinic. We tried to get some shot clock stuff because it's back to educating, right? When it got passed, we wanted to. There are people still against it, and there's probably people in Georgia now that'll say, they still don't want it. And some people argue that they think it not having a shot clock puts coaching in the game, and I'm just the opposite. I think having a shot clock puts coaching in the game. It makes you have to think a little more than maybe some people. Like I tell people this, I was blessed that year we were at Geico's. I had 2 5-star guards in my backcourt. The old way, if I'm up 6 with 4 minutes to go and I go to stall the ball out, my guards are not going to turn the ball over against a regular high school guard. So essentially, if I go into a stall game with those level of guards in my backcourt, I'm probably going to beat you. But with a shot clock, you're going to get multiple opportunities to play defense and get the ball back, to be able to play the game at a more possessions. So, some people's minds are never going to change. But I think in the states that don't have a shot clock right now, I would be willing to bet there's probably only a couple, and they probably don't coach, and they're probably on high school organizations. They're the ones making that vote of whether it's going to go through or not. That's where the convincing is going to be.
So Todd and I are very passionate about this. I am a high school basketball girls head coach for the last 12 years. I did boys 8 years before that. Todd is a women's college assistant. And you kind of talked about this, but I really want to dig in, with the Caitlin Clark effect and great college season and now the great WNBA season. How do we really continue to really grow the girls' side of the game, the women's side of the game in the United States?
I think, I think we have to be much more. What happened in the WNBA last year was absolutely amazing. Her impact, and even when South Carolina won it, they pinpointed that she was a big reason the women's game grew at the Division I level. I think it's championing that, not letting that just be the end all. I think you need to get behind that and make a push. And I know on the women's side, there's attempts, and there have been attempts to do that with the WBB sweatshirts and all of that. I've seen people wear, but I think it's on the high school side. I've got my assistant coach this past year. He was my assistant at Buford. He was actually, he went to the national tournament with Grayson's girls. He was actually the Max Prep's National High School Girls Basketball Coach of the Year. And he and I had this conversation. And there's no money on the girls' side, high school wise. Like when I go to tournaments, I'm getting hotel, flight, food paid for. When I go to some of the national tournaments I'm blessed to go to, and I ask him what he gets sometimes, and he's like, well, they might give us some food. They might give us a couple hotel rooms. I think that's a starting point, equaling out the financial the financial part of it, giving them more opportunity, and showing them they do belong and they are as important, because I feel like sometimes with the financial backing, it's not there.
An interesting follow is I don't know how you guys are in Atlanta, but in Illinois, and I'm involved in the IBCA in Illinois, and sometimes the hardest group to get a hold of is one, the very rural coaches, and two, the inner city coaches. So how do we go about, continuing to grow that coaches develop maybe for those any inner city coaches, whether it be Atlanta or Houston or Chicago or New York, in comparison to at least here in IBC, it's a lot of suburban coaches. How do we kind of connect and grow not just the girls side of the game, but maybe the inner city game and the very rural game?
I think it's continuously looking for inroads. I think a lot of people, because we're all busy, right? We have our season to get ready for. We have our own planning and our own things we have to do. So I just think you have to be just you can't take no for an answer, or you can't take no answer for an answer. We have a lot of times when we're setting everything up for different events, like with our live feed, you have to keep knocking on the door. You got to let them know you're there. And I just think it's that continuance of, hey, we want you involved. Hey, we want to change this. Hey, we're going to keep hammering away until we do have change. You can't give up. I think it's this continuous knocking at the door, letting them know that you're trying to help them grow the game.
So we talked about a little bit with shot clock and like development. So how do we continue to like kind of bridge all the levels, right? There's so many different factors. You have AAU, high school, Catholic schools, uh, academies, right? Public schools. So how do we work towards not only in our states but nationally, kind of bridging that gap between all of them and kind of all getting on the same page so we can continue that development and continue to grow the game. It doesn't have to be like the European model, but like you said, there's more and more first round draft picks, not from around here, which is an awesome thing. But at times, I think the United States game is seen as lacking.
Well, I think it starts with the kid or the player. Um, I think it starts with them whole. You've got to put what's in their best interest first, and then it's specifically that, because I think in everybody's mind they want to do what's best for the player. They want to develop the best player. Nobody gets in this game to lose, whether it's AAU or it's high school or it's college or it's the NBA or it's the G League or it's Overtime Elite. Everybody's in to put out the best product that they can be a part of. And I think it's just connecting those people together back to that educate to navigate. Sometimes you might even have to have just a roundtable discussion and bring all of the different components in. Here in Atlanta specifically, I feel like high school coaches and AAU coaches have a great relationship. I'm I'm not I'm cool with every program, major program, and I've got kids that play in multiple programs, and I have great relationships with those coaches and those directors of those different AAU programs.
Well, then we need to bring you guys to Illinois because I feel like sometimes the AAU coaches and the high school coaches don't get along. Before we go into our final two segments, I'm just curious, taking over as president, maybe what do you see as something you definitely want to get done? And maybe what do you see as the greatest challenge to that?
Well, the thing I really want to get done is I just want to bridge the game. We talk about growing it a lot. I want to bridge it because, I mean, this year's draft really, for example, we showed really well in the live period. And since summer, there's more than one way to skin a cat. You've heard those sayings. I've got guys that played 25 games in the month of June. I mean, we had 14 practices and 8 games, so we were almost 2 to 1. Just my program itself, and we played extremely well in those 8 games we played. We just played both live periods. We didn't go to team camps. We didn't go to any leagues. We just got in and focused on us. And I feel like sometimes you hear in the European game, there's so much skill development versus play. I think that's a big part of it. And play is, it's kind of like your study time, and then the game's the test. I feel like we take too many tests and we don't study the game enough and don't give it a time enough to teach the game. So I think that's a big part of just me and my program. That's what we do. I take advantage of practice time. I'm really detailed in that aspect of it, and I feel like that's part of what's going to be part of growing the game.
So as we move into our last two segments, the first one we call 30-second timeout. It's kind of your opportunity to discuss whatever you want. It could be you, yourself, your program, your organizations you're a part of, your family. You can turn the tables and ask Todd and I a question. There's no referee in your timeout telling you your 30 seconds is up, so it's a loose 30 seconds. But kind of the floor is yours.
I think a lot of coaches get so caught up in the grind, and I was terrible about it early in my career. I think you have to do two things. You got to take time for family. My wife, she's an attorney. I've got two kids that are really busy, and I feel like sometimes for 6 months she's a single mom and doing a corporate job. So I think you have to stop, sometimes take that time out and make sure you're giving back to your family, taking time for them. And I know that's hard at points, but then I think you have to let kids be kids. When we start the summer, our first 2 weekends were off. I just let them. I say, hey man, y'all need to go home, go to the pool, play video games, do whatever you want to do, because there's more than this game. Because if you don't take from this game will take from you. And I think sometimes kids get caught up in everything that they do is basketball, and they need to be more well-rounded. And coaches need to sometimes take time to understand what the important things in their life are, and that's your family and those who you love. Because whether you win or lose, when you come home, they're still going to love you. They're still going to depend on you, and that's the most important thing.
So we don't do this too much, but I'm gonna follow on something you said because you kind of struck a chord with me of letting kids be kids. We're kind of in this age of everybody specializes, right? Me and my wife talk about it all the time. We just missed the tournament because we went on vacation. I'm like, you know what? We're going on vacation. Like my daughter's in fourth grade. We're going to go have fun. Um, so how do we kind of start changing that tide a little bit, right? Because I'll use myself for example. I was a three-sport athlete in high school, and I had football camp in the morning, and a lot of the football coaches were basketball coaches. So like you go at 9, you leave early, and then I would go to baseball. And I feel like that's harder and harder these days. Both the especially the girl side. I'll be honest with some of those things. But how do we go about kind of going back to of that letting kids be kids and letting kids try different things? Because if you look at all high level athletes, right, that get drafted, most of them played multiple sports. It's
So
not two or three.
I was like you. I played every sport. If it was in season, I played it. And it felt like sometimes I remember when I finally graduated high school after going to the beach for a week, I came back and I'm looking around. I'm like, man, I have nothing to do because I'd always been so busy going from one to the other, one to the other, one to the other. For example, me as a coach, I was blessed here again on that really good team. We had the number one football player in America on our team, and he had been offered by Oregon, Ohio State, North Carolina in both sports. And I didn't make him come to summer basketball. Football was his primary sport. He didn't have to come to the summer. I said, you know what? When you're done with football, go enjoy the rest of the day. And I've got another young man, sophomore, who played with us last year, sat down with his dad. He's a sophomore. He's already got major SEC offers. And his dad came in kind of, it's starting to transition. I said, we don't need anything from him this summer. I said, let him do his football, his lifting. I know he's going to be working. We'll figure it out when football is over because that's his primary sport. And then I think that keeps those kids engaged. They're not burnt out, where I'm not taking every bit of their summer. So when they go back to school, they feel like they didn't have a break. And I don't have any data behind it, but I feel like those are the kids who burn out and potentially have a risk of injury. So I let them be kids, man. How much am I going to gain off of a worn out kid coming from football, lifting, running, practicing in the evening? He's burnt out because he's tired. How much of an advantage am I going to gain in the summer, in the month of June, when I'm giving them 2 weekends off anyway, and then we're playing for 2 weekends in the live period? I think you're covering your butt more than you're taking care of them at that point. And that's just my personal opinion. Other people might have much more success than I do doing it other ways, but I think it's all about letting kids be kids and let them enjoy life and just stop and live a normal life occasionally.
So last segment we call it quick hitters. Just gonna come at you with rapid fire questions. Um, the best team you ever coached against?
Would have had to been Cooper Flag in Hawaii last year, Montverde. Just so balanced. mean, specifically him, I think we were down 2 or 4 at halftime, and it's like he woke up in the third quarter and it went from 2 or 4 to 25 real quick. And I mean, every adjustment we made, it didn't matter. They were just that good.
Um, so you kind of had answered something we were going to do in quick hitters. So Todd and I love doing this one because we both like to eat. So where's a really good place in the Atlanta area? If you're going to go, you want to get something to eat, something good, something unique. Where would you go?
If you're looking for steak, I'm a steak guy. You have Little Alley Steakhouse. There's one in Roswell, and there's one in Atlanta, and then one that just opened right here in Milton is called Aberdeen Steakhouse. Unbelievable. If you want really good sushi, there's MF Sushi in Atlanta and MF Sushi in Alpharetta. Both sides of the coin there, but those are phenomenal spots to eat. And
All
I'm
right.
I'm a big eater too.
Yeah. I know we're gonna get all the we're gonna go back and compile the list, John, and we're gonna have to go to all these places here when we visit. Um, Something in coaching you still want to get better at, right? You've had a lot of success, you've had a lot of experiences, but what's something in coaching you want to get better at?
Slowing down. When I get going, sometimes you hear that whole thing, stop and smell the roses. Sometimes I feel like when October hits, it's a marathon, but we as coaches run it like a sprint. I think it's just slowing down, having a little bit more patience and really awareness, being aware of what's happening. Sometimes you get to the end of the season and you finally come out on the other end and you look back and I don't feel like you took in every moment. One of my former players, I was just texting with him. He's the point guard for Spain in the Olympics, Lorenzo Brown. And he was just congratulating me. And I told him to make sure he had a really good camera so he could just stop and take in the sights, sounds, and moments of the Olympics. I said, this is something that very few people get to do, and you get to take that in. So I think it's just stopping and being aware of what you're part of and some of the cool things that you get to see and do. Because as we know, we're in this game, it's been really good to us and it's provided us opportunities and things to do that potentially we would have never been able to do otherwise.
We want to know you're not watching basketball, you're not coaching basketball. What's your favorite sport to watch as a fan outside of basketball?
Golf,
Wow.
easily golf. Yeah, so I'm actually the four caddy on 14 at the Masters. Every year I get to spend my week on number 14. And then if there's a golf tournament close by, I went up to Pinehurst for the US Open. I was up at the President's Cup at Quail Hollow. I love golf. It relaxes me.
All right, Todd. I did not think we'd ever have
No,
someone
no,
that's a
I like
golf
that.
caddy on
I
14.
didn't know if you'd be mandated by state law to say Georgia football. I didn't know if
I'm a
that's
UNC guy, so
okay.
Georgia football, it's great when
Okay.
they win. My assistant coach, I give him crap all the time. His dad played baseball at Georgia, so we're he's a big dog fan. I mean, I don't pull against Georgia. They're extremely good. Kirby Smart, one of my former players, is one of his assistants. So I mean, I don't pull against him, but
Well, it was interesting, Todd, because I was like, okay, he's in the South. He's gonna say football or baseball. Let's see what he says. But golf threw me off.
Yeah,
yeah.
I just didn't know if it was like the state legislation said you had to talk about Georgia football every time you get right.
Well, no, just for me, golf relaxes me. If you ever want a really good nap on a Sunday,
Hmm.
just flip it on about lunch, lay on the sofa. It's pretty relaxing. And then if you're out on the course, everywhere we travel for basketball, we take our golf clubs with us. And like I said, we've been to some really cool places, played some really cool courses. But when you're out there, man, you're away from everything. It's just relaxing. And when you're in the game, like I am, and like we talked about the sprint earlier, it's just a chance to unplug and get away from everything.
Coach must be pretty good at golf because when I'm on the golf course, it doesn't relax me at times.
No,
I'm not very good um, in reference, but it's just
I,
relaxing.
I agree.
my
Um,
happiest is when the drink cart comes by, Todd.
yeah, well, it's pretty good time. I like that too. But let's go to most. I guess we're going to tweak this. It doesn't have to be a coach. It could be just a most influential coach person kind of in your life that kind of got you going and you still reference all the time today?
You know, at this point, you know, my coach just retired after 35 years, my high school coach. And when I left school, I kind of resented him because he was such a hard line, you know, wasn't a relationship guy. And as I started coaching, some of those things come back to play in your head and you start referencing back. And he and I have developed a really, really, really close relationship. But I think in the state, it's the co-mentoring, if that makes sense. It's people that lean on you and you lean on them as well. One of my really close friends, he was the head coach at Tift County for multiple years. He's now the superintendent at Rome City School. His name is Dr. Eric Holland. He and I used to compete against each other like crazy. And he and I just continuously bounce stuff off each other. And then I'm blessed to know a really good coaches, not just in Georgia, but nationally with this platform. And I mean, you just bounce things off people you trust, people that you trust that they're going to give you an unbiased opinion. And the last one I would say outside of my wife would be my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. My father-in-law played at Duke. He gives an unbiased opinion. He always takes himself out of it. So those are the people who really I lean on if I'm struggling making a decision, or my wife's always great at it as well. She always takes her own personal bias out of it and gives me just a sound opinion, which I'm very blessed to have. I'm in the house.
God, he is a genius. He referenced his wife and his in-laws in the
Yep.
same answer. Genius.
I will tell you something I heard at the national conference. We do the it's their Hall of Fame. They call it the Ring of Honor, and Johnny Carter out of Texas said he really wants his team to play mother-in-law defense, constant pressure and constant what do you say? He said constant pressure and constant pestering. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But he gave her in his speech, she was there with him. But you know, they're a big part of my life. My wife's an only child, and they're here a lot, and I'm blessed to have them. To be honest with you, so yeah, that would be the people I lean on heavily.
Coach, so we do our homework on every guest, and I don't think we've had too many of these. So I'm just curious. You do have your PhD, correct?
I'm working on my EDD. Yes, I'm in the midst of that. So I'm a busy person.
So what's been I have my master's as well. What's been your hardest class in graduate school?
Honestly, the writing aspect, because like when you write master's papers, I don't know about you when you got yours. I could sit down and just bang out a 10 pager, but now you're having to use all of this epistemology and all of these terms and you know all of these different focuses, and it's a lot to learn how to write in an academic voice. I think
The
that's been the biggest adjustment for me.
the formatting. Like I spend 5 minutes just doing the formatting before I do anything else.
It is. It's I actually took a break this summer. I knew we were going to Hilton Head. When I was getting my master's, I would be typing while the kids were at the beach.
Yep.
And when I came in the summer, I was like, I am not taking classes this summer. I'll pick back up in the fall. I'm not. So I didn't. And it was probably a good thing that I didn't, because there's a lot of nights my kids will come down and get a drink of water, and I'm sitting here at the table 1, 2 in the morning, either doing film or typing. And that's a mainstay around here. But nothing easy was ever accomplished without a lot of work. So you just have to grind.
You guys lost me at the writing part. I'm just a lowly PE guy. I don't we gotta write papers. What are we doing here?
Well, Coach, we really appreciate your time today. This was a phenomenal hour. I know our guests are going to get a lot from it. When I told some people who we had on tonight, they were very excited for the episode. So thank you again for your time. We appreciate it.
And I will leave with this. I always do this. If anybody wants to reach out to me, my cell phone is 678-697-2887. And my email is Whitehart, WHITEHARTA at fultonschools.org. The schools is plural. I'm a sharer. Off of Kevin Eastman, I'm a learn it all. I don't know as much as I need to, but I'm a big time sharer of the game. If there's anything I can do to help anybody at any point, please feel free to reach out.
Coaches definitely do that. I reached out to Coach and he got back to me within an hour. So, Coach, thank you for your time, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in partnership with the IBCA. Please be sure to rate us on whatever platform you are listening and give us a 5-star rating. For more show content and updates, please follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout. As always, thank you for listening. Tune in next time for more content on the court, off the court, and anything in between.